grandma, this and that. Things that you guys could never understand. Because you know what? It's sarcasm. And Curt texts me back. He's like, I know. And I'm like, yeah, but I got it. Let's bring in Curt Schilling, the legendary Philadelphia Philly and baseball star, and he joins us here. I don't know, Curt. Maybe, I watched you and I saw immediately on your face when you were on Fox News, you just went, oh. And it wasn't that you were apologizing for what you said, but you just went, okay, man.
Well, listen.
Children of the world
it's not
children of the world are going to go nuts.
It's not the first time I've just made a real shitty choice of words. I mean, I did, but we live in the time of the edited quote. We live in the time of the don't give context to the story because that ruins the narrative. And but again, like I said, I texted you. Any normal, rational thinking adult knew exactly what I said, knew exactly what I meant. But that we're not talking about the left when we talk about rational adults and forward and normal thinking adults. It's because everything that they do is based on emotion and it's irrational for the most part.
You think baseball's in a good place, Curt? Overall, as a product for the consumers, do you?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on your metrics and what you're basing that good place on. I think it seems to me like I say this every 5 years. I'm not sure there's been a crop of generational talent this good in a long time. There are a lot of players who I'd pay the ticket price to sit and watch, from Adley Rutschman to Spencer Strider to Acuna, all of them. I mean, some obviously Mike Trout, but I think one thing I know for a fact, and I actually had a chance to sit down with Peter Gammons the other day on my show, and we talked for almost an hour, and no one's ever seen a Shohei Ohtani.
Oh my God!
And baseball's never seen him. He's better than Babe Ruth by far. Babe Ruth didn't pitch and hit at the same time. It overlapped a little bit, but there was never a time when he was an everyday player and a pitcher to this degree. And I've said that I think Mike Trout will be the best baseball player anyone alive ever sees. I think he might be the best hitter than anybody ever sees. He might be the best combination deep position player hitter. But
are you okay with the strikeouts though, Curt?
No, well, they're cheap now. They're not worth what they used to be worth. The approach to hitting, all the crap that's being taught at younger levels goes against the fundamentals of the game. The game is about getting on base. You can't swing and miss 100 and in 175 at bats and be the best hitter you can be. I'm always curious about. I don't know what kind of strikeout totals I can put up now. They would be higher than what I did. I know that for sure because
you think you'd be a 300 strikeout guy year in, year out?
I think only because I've forced the innings. The guys that are 300 strikeout guys are doing it in less innings now, which is amazing, but they're not hanging around for a lot of the game. And, the de-emphasis on that starting pitcher, I don't think is good for the game at all, because I can remember, there were pitching matchups you lived for. Carlton, Gibson, Seaver, Ryan, Koufax, and Clemens, Maddox, all of them. And as a pitcher, I lived for those. You had your antagonists and your protagonists, and you don't have that anymore. And now, I don't know that you'll ever have a situation like you had with RJ and I in Arizona, in the sense that, you go into a postseason series and, oh my God, you have to look out for Scherzer and Verlander. Well, you have to compete with them for about 14 innings, maybe, because they're not going 9, and that it's just a different mindset. And I think in many ways, it's a far easier time to pitch in the big leagues from an approach and perspective. Listen, if I had to if I had to prepare to get 18 outs a night, my God, I was preparing to get 27. I was preparing to face the Jeters and the guys at the top lineup 4 times. So those first at-bats were setting up the second at-bats, which were setting up the third at-bats, which were setting up the potential fourth at-bats. If I only have to worry about a guy 2 times a night, well, I mean, think about it. If I've got to prepare for Albert Pujols for 4 at-bats as opposed to 2, what's harder?
Oh, no, I get it. What do you make of the pitch clock?
I was wrong, very wrong about it. I thought it was going to be a much bigger deal for the hitters, and I think it is, than it was for the pitchers. Mainly because good pitchers work fast anyway. But I mean, proof's in the pudding, right? Games are half hour shorter. I don't know that means more people are watching them. Maybe more people are watching them longer. But it's worked. It's shortened the game time. I don't know if it's had where it's going to really, I think, have an impact is, and I said this, with the pitch clock, you would have had no Kirk Gibson moment. You wouldn't have had Joe Carter's at bat. You wouldn't have had Carlton Fisk's at bat. Because if you go back and play those out, you wouldn't have had a Gonzalez versus Mariano Rivera bat because every pitch was more than 20 seconds. That's what made them moments, was the drawn out, the drama over the Kirk Gibson at bat. Those don't have, I mean, you'll still have iconic moments, but there won't be anything like, I can remember the Gibson at bat with Vin Scully, and part of and then Joe Buck had some other ones, but those moments are changing and they're gone. There is no drama and suspense, and I don't know if that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah. So again, like you said, late inning heroics with all that. Again, too, because I've watched it. It seems like some of the pitchers and some of the Philly pitchers too look like they're struggling with it. And I want to get your thoughts on the 2023 Phillies. I say this at the beginning of the year. It looks like they're kind of picking up their stride a little bit now. But Curt, is there such a thing as just being a one-year wonder where all the things that went right for you last year, all of a sudden the next year you're not winning late inning games.
Right.
Your bullpen's not late being effective. Your starters are not going long enough. You're wearing it out, and you're giving up runners on base, and you're not scoring guys across the dish. Is that kind of a little bit what we're seeing with this version this year?
Well, I think, obviously they've been hit by the injury bug in a multitude of ways, but 162 games is the ultimate test. They're too talented, top to bottom roster wise, I think, to not give it a go. Now with the expanded playoff format, honestly, I just want to get in. If I have a couple starters, you have a Wheeler and a Nola, just get in. And so, I don't think it to the effect of the NHL where the playoffs are a second season. Baseball isn't. And when you play, I don't know that it's cheap in the playoffs by expanding them. I think it makes it less of a challenge to make it, obviously. But the defensive argument for that is that more cities have more interest for longer parts of the season, and that's a good thing. I think it also spices up the deadline a lot. Although the problem now is we're getting to a potential where the salary structures are making everybody immovable, except for the rare player. But I think the Philly, let's be clear, they're in a good division. The Marlins are shocking everybody, as are the Orioles, and as are the Reds, and as are the Diamondbacks. That's that influx of young talent. I think Corbin Carroll might be one of the 5 best players of the last 50 years. And he's, what do you get, a $111 million deal? He's got after having about 5 at bats.
Yeah.
But he's living up to the hype, and it's a fascinating story. Anyway, when you looked at the schedule preseason, and one of the things that I thought was going to benefit the Phillies was the going to a balanced schedule. You no longer have the Braves 19 times. You've got before the year you got the Reds instead of the Braves, which was a good thing. Turns out now they might have the best player in baseball in this kid, Diaz. And so the schedule's not what I thought it would be. It's impacting teams differently. I feel sad for the people in Kansas City and Oakland. But for the most part, everybody else is having a decent season. You look at these divisions from the AL East, which again, my wife placed a futures bet before the season on the Baltimore Orioles to make the playoffs and win the World Series. And she's going to win a lot of money. They're really, really good. And I think Adley Rutschman is Joe Mauer with power.
Curt, I covered the Rays for like 12 years when I had my show in Tampa. And I got a chance to know Andrew Silverman and all them, Andrew Friedman and all them guys who, once they bought the team from the Moley and them guys, I got to tell you, man, I don't know how a team with a $68 million payroll every single year beats teams with $200 million payrolls in the American League East like they do. And Joe Madden told me this, and maybe this is part of the problem with the Phillies a little bit. Man, their Durham AAA club, they roll out talent, and their minor league system has been spectacular every single year since they've had ownership of that team. Is that one of the things you think that hurts the Phillies, is that their minor league system
absolutely
it's just nowhere now?
It makes me think that the Rays need to move to a city like Nashville, because they should. Can you imagine that group of people? It was like Theo going to Boston.
Yeah.
You give a guy like Billy Bean a $200 million payroll. The Rays are just better at putting a roster together. They're better at drafting. They're better at all of the player development, all those things. In many ways, I look at the Braves like I looked at the Cardinals for 20, 30, 40 years. They just make baseball players. And it's not that they're creating prospects. It's like when their prospects come up, it's like Wander Franco. They're 5-star, 5-tool, top 10 in the big leagues, and they have multiple kinds of guys like that. I think there's a philosophy that Theo mentioned to me a long time ago, that I agree with. And that is that when you're hemmed in by payroll, generally you draft your hitting and you buy your pitching, because pitching is such a hit and miss endeavor that you spend a lot of money on the Mark Appels of the world, and you end up, that money ends up going out the window. And
look at the Braves. To your point, the Braves invest. John Sherrills told me years ago, Curt, that he invests almost all their draft equity in arms.
Yep. Well, there's two philosophies to that, right? If you have a play, and I think it speaks to, you got to know your people, and that's more than just your players. Know what your strengths are in the minor leagues. If you have which the Braves do, if you have level after level of outstanding pitching coaching, then you have one organizational wide approach that the day this kid comes in from the draft, he's taught to pitch a certain way, that the same way they teach him to pitch in the big leagues. And it's the same way with teaching these guys the Tampa Bay Ray way, whatever that might be. I've always found that stuff to be wildly successful. But the fact of the matter is, the Rays draft better than everybody. They build rosters better. And I think you're seeing with this new game that's being played now, you're seeing in the 26-man roster and all the things that go with that, I think you're seeing versatility go through the roof from a value perspective. When you look at Ohtani and his potential $500 million contract, you're paying for a $35 million hitter and a $35 million pitcher, and you're getting a deal at $50 million a year. You look at guys like, and I've said it repeatedly, like Dalton Varsho for Toronto, a guy who can play left field, center field, and catch, and do it at a big league level. Not just but you're seeing these young guys come up with immense amounts of versatility, because they're realizing the more positions I play, the more value I have. The more value I have, the sooner I get to the big leagues. And with the roster makeup being the way it is, and a team like Tampa, they don't sign their stars to extended contracts.
No way.
They get them to 6 years. They deal them, and they go back and those draft picks are much more valuable to the Rays than they are to the Kansas City Royals, because the Rays are going to come out with a 5-star player where the Royals aren't. And so they value things differently. And I think when you look at it, it's always been a constant. Listen, over the last 50 years, the ownership of every one of these teams has changed. But the Yankees have always been winners. The Dodgers have always been winners. You know, when you look at a bad team and you look at an organization like the Mets under the Wilpons, they were bad for 30, 40 years, and the roster turned over every year. The coaches changed every other year, but the only thing that stayed consistent was the ownership. And when you have bad owners, look at what the Angelos family did to the Orioles. I mean, he ruined a baseball franchise in a city that worshipped its team. You know, fortunately, they're coming back. But ownership, it has an immense amount to do with longevity in being good and bad. So, you know, you look at Oakland, you know, for that should be a big market. I mean, Oakland is now a cesspool. Unfortunately, the city has turned into a nightmare.
City officials have destroyed the Golden State Warriors had to move out. The Raiders moved out.
Yeah.
Now the A's are getting pushed out because California does not want to build them, nor will they build sports franchise a stadium. They're not going to use taxpayer money because you know what? I mean, I got to pay I got to pay $80 for gasoline.
But the taxpayer in California doesn't have any money left.
That's right.
You know, and I say that jokingly, and I kind of half-heartedly laugh at it, but it's true. Gavin Newsom has ruined that state.
Ruined it.
And you know, it's sad because you know they have bogarted the good weather. It's 72 degrees every day in California, and it's a great place to live, but it's not. You know, and it's you're seeing so little come out of California from a you know, walking the streets of San Francisco and what a beautiful, unbelievable city it is with the trolley cars. No, it's a cesspool. It's turned into a cesspool. That whole place has, and their solution is to bring more illegal immigrants and raise taxes, which is that's why you're seeing people exit. The exodus from California is far more significant than any state in the country, and for all the right reasons.
Absolutely, Curt. Rob Thompson, are you a fan?
Yeah, I'm generally never not a fan, except for coaches that make it about themselves. You know, I'm not a big fan of the guys like Bobby Valentine, you know, where Bobby was a lot of Bobby's career, it was about Bobby. Or you know, guys who think they're bigger than the game or who think they can remake this head coach here at Tennessee. You know, they've been phenomenal. They failed back-to-back years with teams that probably should have been in the World Series championship game. But you watch them, and I think players are a manifestation of the manager in many, many cases, much less so in the big leagues now because the managers are shrinking back from the on-the-field impact that they used to have. But I've never not been a fan of a manager, except for the guys, like I said, who make the story. You know, the guy who says, you know, the college guy who says, I've never beaten Wake Forest. Well, of course you haven't. You're not a player. You don't beat Wake Forest. Your team does. You know, you hear high school coaches say stuff like that. It's like, no, you don't beat anybody. You know, if you're going to take the credit when your team, you know, gets its ass kicked, and you have to, you know, or if you're going to give the players the credit when they win, you can't take take away the credit when they lose. It's the players. And so, yeah, I'm all right with that. And I think he's got an immensely talented team. Listen, they got off to a tough start. Nola and Wheeler were nowhere. You know, I still am on the train that the Zack Wheeler trade to Philadelphia was one of the biggest free agent moves in the last 5-8 years. I said it when it happened. I've been in love with that guy ever since. Just an army. He reminds me a little bit of, in many ways, the guy I saw who I thought had the best arm I ever saw was A.J. Burnett, but with command of the strike zone. You know, I think the only thing that's made me
you think that's what really enticed Dombrowski is kind of he saw the same thing that you saw because Dombrowski was around Burnett obviously down in Miami when he was down there, so that's probably what attracted him, right, Curt, to that.
Well, I think so. Listen, I know one thing better I think than anybody alive, and that's pitching. I can watch a guy throw to a hitter, much less an inning, and tell you a lot about what I'm looking at. When I see a guy, and I've been wrong every now and then. I mean, I was involved with some big league teams during the draft, you know, 10, 15 years ago, 15 years ago. And I remember my draft report on Chris Sale. I was one of the few guys that was down. I said, listen, this guy, he's funky. Everything looks weird. It's kind of Randy Johnson-like, and, it's electric stuff, but I think he's going to have a significant issue staying healthy. And, he had a Hall of Fame start to his career, and he was, I think they got the value out of him, the team that drafted him, but he's had the situation in Boston has been a nightmare. But I know pitching, and I know when I see guys, when Kevin Gausman, I had a chance to run into him and when Buck was in Baltimore and meet with him and talk with him and showed him the split and love the arm. But the one thing I can't do is I can't talk to these guys. So I don't know what their makeup is like. I can tell a lot from watching them pitch. I have a problem with any starting pitcher that comes out before the 8th or 9th inning tipping their cap. Because I was taught a different way, and I don't blame them. Listen, when you sign Jacob deGrom to a $185 million contract, your goal is to get 30-some starts out of him. You do that however you have to do that. If you have to do that in 5-inning chunks, so be it. But and listen, Jacob deGrom was one of my favorite pitchers in the world. I think dominant when he was dominant, he was every bit as good as Pedro 2000, which I think absolutely. He might even have better stuff. He threw 100.
Wow.
He had command of the strike zone, I think, like I did, but he had 4 wipeout pitches. But I bet before the season, I bet the over-under, and I took the under of 20 starts. I just did not think there was any way physically this kid can do it. His body is not conditioned to hold up, and it's not his fault. I was devastated to see the second Tommy John, because this is a guy that baseball needs on the mound. And I know what it feels like to be doing that press conference that baseball's not in your future for the next 6, 12, 18 months.
God, Kurt, that just must suck. And
you know what? To put it in perspective, it's like you go to off-season, the off-season, mandatory off-season workouts in football, and your number 1 wide receiver blows his Achilles tendon out in the first walkthrough. Like, I can't even fathom what that feels like. And I've had injuries and I was out for periods of time, but I got chills just talking about it. I get emotional physically when I see these press conferences because I know what they're feeling. Now, I know the other side. I know the other side of coming out being better than I was when I went in. But you're talking about a second Tommy John for a guy that was, I think he could have had a Koufaxian career, still could, and get to the Hall of Fame on 6 or 7 good years because his numbers would be so far beyond anything anybody's
Kurt,
ever done.
let me say this to you here, and I think this comes down to the fact that these guys just are not prepared like you guys were. Do you understand, Kurt, that your 200 wins is probably going to be the benchmark now in baseball for guys when they retire, because nobody's getting to 300 wins.
Well,
no one.
I agree. Especially now with the opener, right?
Right.
Now
Well, Cleveland's probably the last 300-game winner that we'll ever see in baseball. So that accentuates your numbers even more so that you're a 200 plus. We may never see another 200 win guy again.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Again, I don't blame the pitchers. Because it's like I said, when you draft a kid and you give him $7 million, that means nothing if this kid doesn't get to the big leagues. So you protect him, you coddle him, and you get him into a big league uniform as fast as possible. And if I was going to write out, Dan, a process by which you could screw a kid in the worst possible way, it would be that one. Coddle him in the minor leagues. Don't ever let him go past the 5th or 6th inning. Don't ever let him hit 100 pitches. And then here's the problem. You can't, and I'll use a football analogy in just a second. You can't ask a pitcher to do something for the first time in the big leagues. You couldn't ask a college football player to go through off-season workouts and have his first helmet pads be opening night in the NFL season.
No way.
You physically couldn't handle it. And it's the same thing with pitchers and with hitters to some degree. If I had I had close to, I had over 600 innings in the minor leagues, but I was only in the minor leagues 86, 87, 88, parts of 89 and 90. So it was still fast, and I was 23, 24, and the Orioles did it right. They were always about maturation and bringing their pitchers up a certain way. But I had probably 20 complete games in the minor leagues. And you know, I had a 200 inning season in AA combined. So when I got to the big leagues and I was in the 8th inning with a runner on third in a 1-run game and 1 out and a big hitter at the plate, I'd been there before. I pitched in that scenario before. And Johnny Padres is one of the reasons why I think it's very hard to be a good pitching coach and teach game situations if you haven't ever done it. Padres threw a shutout in Game 7 of the World Series in 1955 against the New York Yankees. One of the greatest efforts ever by a Brooklyn Dodger. It was kind of ironic that our career paths followed very similar paths. But Johnny could tell me what it's like to break out your third pitch in the 9th inning of a game where everything's on the line. And so I had the adrenaline. Same thing again. In the NFL, when you go from Game 16, season's over, to Game 1 of the playoffs, it's a different intensity.
Absolutely.
Right? You can't, and there's nothing I can say to you that's going to get you ready. I can tell you all I want, but until your fingers are in the dirt and the snap count's being called in a playoff game, you don't understand it. And when you get that first play and you're sitting on your ass, you're like, okay, this game's a little bit harder and faster today than it was last week because it means more. It's everything. You're playing win or go home football. And I played win or go home baseball in the minor leagues. I can remember, and he's still a dear friend of mine. My second-year coach, Dick Verdino in Greensboro, North Carolina, we were in Savannah, Georgia playing, and I had punched out 14 guys through 8 innings, and I was winning 1-0 in the game. And after the top of the 9th finished, I was I hid myself in the corner of the dugout, and as soon as the last out was made, I sprinted to the mound. And he's looking for me to take me out of the game. And I was like, no. And I punched out the side. It was the most guys ever struck out. I struck out 17. And to this day, it's the story he tells. Like, he tells, and he says it to me. He goes, I'll never forget, man, I'm looking for you. I'm going to pull you out of the game. And here you are out with 120 pitches in the 9th inning of a game in low A ball, and you strike out the side. I had that. I was raised by a man that taught me that. I was raised by old school baseball people that taught me the same thing in football. When you get those line coaches that are 3rd generation NFLers, they teach old school. They teach, at the bottom of the pile, sure, poke the shit out of his eye. I don't care. And there's
wait, Curt, don't say that because there's some snowflakes around. Here's
the thing, honestly, about the snowflakes. I said this, and I was trying to come up with an analogy. And one of the things that I tell people, especially on my social media, all of the people that come to me with enormous amounts of hate and intolerance and just disgusting, repulsive stuff, all of those people are not supposed to like me because they stand for everything, and everything they stand for, I hate. I don't hate them. They're not worth the effort. But I hate what they stand for.
Curt, I said this, man. That's a reason that there's more people in the stands than there are on the field.
Well, exactly right. And here's the thing. That their disapproval means that I'm living life morally, ethically right. I'm living with honor. I'm living with integrity. Doesn't mean I don't sin. Doesn't mean I don't screw up. As much as I talk, I screw up hourly. But the fact of the matter is, I think God knows I'm trying to do the right thing. I certainly don't always do it, but I'm trying to do the right thing. And at the end of it, that's why I sleep okay at night. And like I said, if you could see my social media, the message, it really honestly is inspiring. The amount of direct messages I get on social media from people that are famous, people that are saying, hey, listen, I appreciate you speaking up. I can't, because if I do, I'm going to get buried. Athletes.
Oh, I admire you, dude. I love, and I know.
But I know you get the same thing.
You get
the same people saying, thank you for being my voice. And those are, by a factor of 10 to 1, they outweigh the hate. And here's the thing. If what you stand for doesn't cost you, then you're not standing for anything. So what did it cost me? I'm the guy in the middle of the Weimar Republic in 1936 in Germany saying Nazis are horrible people. No one's gonna, they're bad. They're gonna hate my guts. I want those people to hate my guts. I don't align with them on anything. And when you look at what this country is, what's happening here, it's gut wrenching. And I mentioned the other day, and I know we talked about it, but I used the word trigger. Somebody's going to proverbially pull the trigger. And my whole point was about Matt Getz and Jim Jordan and all these guys who I see day after day talking on Capitol Hill. And they're saying all the things we want to say, and then they don't do shit. And I'm saying, get off your ass and do something. Fix this. Hey, Dan, we voted them in because we can't do anything about it. We put you in office so you could. Now shut up and do something. Or get the hell out of the way and somebody that can.
Let me two last questions here for you, Curt. I got to tell you a story, and I don't think I've told you this. I was raised in Stamford, Connecticut, and Jackie Robinson, when I was a kid, my dad played golf with him, and Jackie lived in Stamford.
Really?
And me and Gary Cobb, who was a football player who did.
I know Gary Cobb.
Gary and
yeah,
Gary
he was a radio guy, right?
Yeah,
we're
both Stanford guys, and when we were younger, Jackie Robinson would come to Little League anyway. And to see what the Dodgers did last Friday, I mean, Curt, you're not to go too psycho on this thing, but hey, look, I don't care what people want to do in their life.
No,
but you're a baseball team.
Here's the thing, Dan. So first of all, the Dodgers were having a pride night. A Catholic group of fans said, hey, we're offended by these group. People are offensive. They kicked them out. That group, which is a group of there's 1.3 billion Catholics in the world. Who do you think there are more of? Catholics or that small trans group of offensive people? Excuse me, no. And here, like you said, this goes to the whole subject. I don't care.
I don't either.
Here's the thing. And that's the problem. We don't care as much as they want us to about their problems. I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care who you worship. I don't care what you wear. I don't care about any of those things. Bring it into my school to my kid. I care. You make me, you want a set of laws to make me speak, to make you happy? Bullshit. I first, second, third, and fourth amendments, read them, figure them out. Because again, the government doesn't belong in the bathroom. It doesn't belong in the bedroom, and it doesn't belong in the church. The government is here to provide security for its citizens and an infrastructure, which we pay taxes for. All this other bullshit, this is what we're watching right now is we're heading towards tyranny again. I really believe, honest to God, Dan, and think about your entire life. Have you ever been able to sit down and say something confidently predictable, prediction-wise? I think we're going to see martial law in this country or in this hemisphere in the next 12 months.
Wow.
I think there's going to be an event or an incident created by the powers that be that will create a situation where martial law. I think COVID was the test run. I think what's happening to Trump, if it doesn't work, and I don't think it's going to work because we now know that it's complete fabrication and like everything else is bullshit.
You think when they lock Trump up, that'll be the?
I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to. I think when he gets free of this and he's running, because if he runs, he wins. I think he wins in a landslide. If he runs, I think that they'll find a way to shut everything down. Or God forbid, I honestly, and I hate to say it like this, now that we know about the stuff with Kennedy and that there was the CIA, the stuff that they're releasing shows that they were involved in that whole thing. But I think that now that we're reading those, and here's the thing, people that were labeled conspiracy nuts are actually now turned out to be truth tellers. And that's
Robert Kennedy has been really, without a doubt. That leads me into this, Kirk. Before I ask about your show, have you enjoyed going into the media? And because were you a media accessible guy when you played? Yeah. Do you enjoy doing it now and having a platform like you do on Outkick with Travis and his group there? Clay Travis in his Outkick, which is very, very huge. Do you enjoy it, like with now what you're doing?
So a couple things. When I was in high school, I failed every oral report I was ever assigned because I was terrified of standing up front and talking to people.
Huh.
When I got to the big leagues, thankfully, I had a class in the minor leagues about media awareness, and I realized that the media was part of my job. And so I stood at my locker for 400 some starts, win, lose, or draw, and answered every question from every reporter, even really stupid ones. And I was very accessible. I was a quotable guy because, and it wasn't because I wanted to be in the paper. It was because I had passion. If you're going to ask me a question, I'm not going to give you a yes/no answer because life is a lot deeper than yes or no in many ways. And so if you're asking me something and by the way, you will never be confused on my opinion. You will never be confused where I stand on the subject. You might not like it. In fact, you probably won't like it in some cases, but that's okay. I was never a mystery to people. A lot of times they would ask questions because they needed me to give them the answer. They knew I was going to give them so they could write the blow-up piece they were going to write about what an idiot I am. But at the same time, here, I recognize, as you did, there are members of the media and there are good people, and they're not the same thing. There are a lot of really good members of the baseball media, Jason Stark and Tim Kirkchin and Ken Rosenthal, and guys who were fans before they were writers, and I didn't have a problem with them writing bad stuff about me as long as it was true. What I did have a problem with was the liars and the manipulators, the phonies, the Shaughnessy's of the world, George Keane, just really bad people who I knew lied. The Bob Hyman, and there's another one in New York. I can't remember his name. And he's
Madden?
incredible. Huh?
Madden?
No, he's a writer. He's a beat writer for the Yankees. But anyway, I was on the other side of their lies. So I know they lie. And I know they make stuff up. And I know now on this side of it, 9 out of the 10 stories that start with a team source or an unnamed player are lies. They're made up because no one's going to call them on it. They're only going to call the story. Oh my God. The next day, it's not going to be a question. How did you get an unnamed player? Because I know half the guys that use those sources, players don't talk to. Nobody's going to be an unnamed player for this guy. He's an asshole.
Wait a minute, Curt. Are you saying that media guys make stories up and lie?
And they did it because, and I realized why later in my career, if you think about it. You've got, and it happens in the NFL too, you've got college graduates with PhDs or whatever the hell they have in journalism. They're making $65,000 a year, standing in front of a kid from the Dominican who speaks 5 words of English, and he's got $150 million in the bank. The bitterness and the jealousy is real.
Oh,
and you can see it. And it's the same thing in the NFL.
You feel it.
Let me ask you something. It's funny because we talk about this systemic racism. Why in the hell is 86% of the NFL sports media white males when 80% of the athletes in the sport are black?
Because
maybe it's because that systemic racism is pretty much owned by the left.
Well, I'll tell you what, Curt, do me a favor. I'm up against the post here. Tell folks how they can watch your show at Outkick. So many people now are involved with Outkick.
Yep.
It's a truly great platform.
Let
folks know.
Yep. Outkick Clay Travis started Outkick, and it really has a kind of a Barstool, Portnoy roots kind of thing. Self-made Clay is obviously a very conservative guy who found that balanced line of talking about politics inside of sports, but still talking about sports. At Outkick, we've got Candace. I mean, there's tons of people that are associated with Outkick and that are conservative voices. And I think Riley Gaines is getting involved now as well. But Outkick.com is the website. If you go into the website on the right side of the top, you'll see shows. The Curt Schilling Baseball Show airs every Tuesday and Friday. It is pretty much, for the most part, 100% baseball. I interviewed John Papelbon last week, caught up with him. Peter Gammons yesterday, which will be aired later on. I've talked to different players. I'm going to talk to John Lester. Hopefully Roger Clemens pretty soon. But baseball stuff. We talk about baseball, and I try to give people insight. It's funny because I broke it. So this archaic piece of paper, this was my first iteration of my notebook when I played. I still have everything from when I played. So I pulled it out and I was explaining to people what my notebook was. This is Andres Galarraga. And so it's every at-bat, every pitch I ever threw him before there was video. I had to do it all by hand.
Who's the one on Bonds?
Well, the one on Bonds has a lot of home runs on it. So, yeah, nine to be exact.
Hey, Curt, I want to leave you with this stat. I found this in 2004. Bonds had 373 at bats, and in 2004 he reached base safely 376 times.
Yeah. No, and that's the sad part about it was he was a Hall of Famer. I don't think he does what he does without the PEDs.
Okay,
but he was going to the Hall of Fame before it. And I've said, listen, unfortunately, I don't vote for the guys that I know cheated. Doesn't mean I don't like them. Doesn't mean I don't respect them. Doesn't mean I don't think they were great players. I think I was the last guy. I died on the Clemens Hill. I defended Roger through it all.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, though, Curt. There was not a steroid test back in those days. And here's been my contention. Guys took steroids to make more money.
Right.
They did it because here's what the owners did. Barry
said he did it because he was pissed that McGwire and Sosa got all of the media in 98 and 99 when he was doing shit they were never doing. It was about attention for Barry. But
Curt, get this. So Roger Clemens, from the time he was 36 with that sweetheart deal where he only had to pitch at home, and Bonds from the time he was 37. Both men made $250 million from the time they were 37 to 43. So you know what they did? They did PEDs and cashed their Hall of Fame ticket in. Yeah, they did it for $250 million. And get this, this is my contention, Curt. Then the owners came in and went, holy shit, I don't give a shit about the player's health. However, I don't want to pay $50 million for a 50 home run guy. Right. I'd rather pay $20 million for a guy who hits 35.
The problem was you had to pay $50 million for a 50 home run hitter, and the league became replete with those. 50 home runs wasn't a big thing anymore. And so now everybody's making $50 million. But the thing is, the two most hypocritical groups on the planet, the owners and the writers. The writers bought in. They knew what was going on. They wrote about they were, when you think about Cal Ripken bringing baseball back after the 94 strike, Sosa and McGwire took Ripken and carried it forward. That home run chase captivated everybody, and everybody knew what they were doing.
You think Tony La Russa knew what was going on in the 80s?
You know what? F him. He's so full of shit. He knew all about that stuff. There's again, you've been in a locker room.
I think he did too.
You see everybody naked. When that guy comes in, when I come in ripped and shredded, somebody's going, okay, what the hell? This guy's taking
Curt, the year before he was 185 pounds, Canseco. The next year he comes in, he's 238.
Well, Jose Canseco would have never had a career if he hadn't cheated. I think that's pretty clear. But again, the one thing that I hold dear, never doing it, because people ask me, I don't know what it was like on the football field, but I can't imagine being a guy.
Oh, everyone did it.
Going against, but I'm saying if I'm a guy that isn't doing it, going against a guy that is, number one, he's recovering faster. And number two, on game 15, he feels a whole lot better mentally than I do. And that was the big thing for me. It was the recovery thing that they talked about. But the fact of the matter is, when I die, which might be sooner rather than later, I will die with my legacy. I will die. I like to think, and I've said this before, I said on my show, two things that I told my wife in 1992 that I wanted when I played. We were talking about, I just had my first year. I said, I want to win the Roberto Clemente Award. And when I retire, I want everybody that suited up with me to say, if I had my family's life on the line for one game, who would I give the ball to? I wanted
Curt
to be
Schilling.
that guy. But I mean, that's what I wanted out of my career. I'm going to die. I'll have those two things.
Let me tell you, Curt.
You talk about $250 million. The legacy, what's it worth? Because they can't buy it and they don't have it.
I have to win one nine-inning ball game, man. I'm throwing your ass out there.
Well, you're winning.
That's a given. Hey, Curt, always great catching up with you. Folks, please do me a favor. Go to Outkick. Click on the little link where it says shows. Click on Curt Schilling's baseball show. Obviously, he speaks his mind.
Every Tuesday, every Friday, Dan, I always love catching up with you, bub. And I the Leroy Selman jersey just makes me tingle.
Let me tell you, Curt, this guy's the greatest guy I've ever known in my life, and yet he was, according to Mean Joe Green and Bill Belichick, they said he's the greatest 34 defensive end of all time. He was
Really?
unblockable.
Really?
Unblockable. And I wore 93 at the University of Miami because he wore 93 at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And he was a lifetime friend, one of the greatest people I've ever met.
It's still one of my top 5 NFL uniforms ever right there.
Yep, and I enjoyed playing for the Buccaneers myself.
Yeah.
Curt, thank you so much, my friend.
Dan, take care, buddy. It's always great.
You got it. That is the legendary Curt Schilling. Please do me a favor, guys, and please do me a favor, too. Check out his show at Outkick. I absolutely love talking to Curt Schilling, man. This guy I'll tell you what, man, the conviction he has, that's how he won ball games. And that's how he's winning life. Hey, we all have ups and downs. We do. You know what it is, man? The toughest opponent I've ever played is life. It's not you. It'll never be you. Do me a favor. Hit the like button. We'll reset. I want to get into the 49ers. Do they really have a shot at dethroning the Philadelphia Eagles? We'll do that next. Hit the like button. Keep it here. Power Hour up here on the National Football Show.